Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Richard MacRae, owner of Analog Game Studios and co-designer of several game titles. Richard's newest abstract game called Schooled is currently on Kickstarter. Richard, welcome back to the binge. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, James. It's so awesome to be here back, and congratulations on the latest Kickstarter. Venus Survivors. Absolutely incredible what you've done.
Oh, thank you, my friend. This will be the last time on this episode we'll talk about, but for those of you who want to check out Cities of Venus Survivors just launched today, I encourage you to go and type in Cities of Venus. You'll find it on Kickstarter. We'll love your pledge and support. Anything helps, even $1, as Rich knows. Those backer counts is what helps us with the algorithms. So show us your love. If people want to show some support, Analog Game Studios, Tin Robot Games, give us each $1, and it'll help us with our algorithms. So, Richard, for those who don't know who Analog Game Studios is, maybe you can just give us a quick little primer here.
Sure, yeah. I started it really by mistake, you could say, when I designed a game with a friend, and we put it on Kickstarter, and it did well. And I liked that. I liked the idea of designing a game, but what really interested me was bringing new casual games to the market that are beautiful, so artwork critical, and easy to learn, easy to play, and just a good amount of fun for anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes. And that's when I looked around and found that there were tons of board game designers. They just loved designing games, but they didn't want to have anything to do with the commercial side. I thought to myself, well, I'm an MBA. I love the commercial side. This is the stuff that I get excited about. So that's when I knew I wasn't going to be a designer. I was going to be a guy who published brilliant games by brilliant designers, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough thing, I think, for people who are designers that want to get their games out there, right? Because there's only a finite number of publishers. It is the path to take, unfortunately, for those who maybe are not business-minded or not interested in the business side of it and really just want to do the creative and the design. Then that's the path, right? The path is to kind of pair up with a publisher and find somebody, whether it be through a prototyping event in your local play area, sending to publishers either on their websites, or most of the publishers have contact forms on their websites that you can fill it in and send some information in, starting off with hopefully a pitch sheet so they can get an idea of what your game is about and kind of build a relationship from there. But it's cool having publishers like yourself who are dedicated now to taking other people's games and bring them to market, right? I know people like myself where I'm still doing my own games. You know, my bandwidth for bringing on other people's games is much, much more narrow than, say, publishers who are exclusively working with designers. So I think that's so cool of Analog. Just for those out there, I've backed a number of Analog games myself. I have some on my game shelf here. What I love about your games, and as we were saying just before we went on air, I'm like, is this kind of like the direction you're going? Because you've got this, I don't want to say a niche because it's not a niche, but you definitely have almost this positioning you've carved out for yourself where these quick to table, easy to learn and play, what I call them gateway games, right? Of here's something I can teach to somebody who's a new gamer, but it's got enough kind of strategic depth that I can play with someone that's been in the hobby for a while. Is that a direction you've kind of been just naturally flowing, or is it consciously going this direction, or what's kind of led that journey?
I wouldn't say it's consciously going. We didn't sort of set out to do it, but we did discover that those are very fun games.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of strategy games myself. So number one requirement when I'm looking at games is, of course, I have to like it too.
Yeah.
Because you have to believe in the game, right? So if I fall in love with the game, that's a big bonus, and that helps. And then typically, I guess, these very strategic two-person games where you're fighting over dominance, mano a mano, they are fun. I like them. For that reason, I guess this one is one of those. There is actually a 3-person version to Schooled that the designer did come up with. But I looked at it and I felt when I was watching that one play that it was just so typical of the conflict is such that two people pretty much have to gang up on a third person and then eliminate them and then take over and fight each other, so to speak. So I didn't like that kind of an arrangement in the game, and for that reason we brought it out as a two-person game.
I find it interesting, this industry, is that, you know, it's almost like these ebbs and flow of trends, right? And so if you think during COVID, right, solo games exploded, right? Everyone's like, okay, I need a solo game. Then I started seeing this movement towards kind of like higher count games, right? Like people wanting like 5-6 player games because you never have that kind of traditional 4-person setup at a lot of game nights. And now and I think Kelp is probably the one that really triggered me to think, wow, there's a massive market here for 2-player games. That's a 2-player game. That game was like, what did it do? Like $1 million some odd dollars, right? Like it was huge, so big that it actually got counterfeited, right? That's how big Kelp was. And, you know, so there's this whole trend now towards 2-player games, which to me makes a lot of sense. I think you got a lot of people that, yes, go out to their game nights and they want to bring a higher, you know, count game when you've got larger groups, but still with their spouse at home or maybe with their kid, they want something that plays really well at 2-player level that they can pull out quickly before dinner and play, or maybe have something to play on kind of on like a lazy Sunday afternoon, so to speak. So I think this is really on tone with kind of what we're seeing in trend-wise going in the industry. I think that, again, what I love about the games that you've done, and we're just saying just before on air, because I brought up again, is Latte Throwdown is still my favorite that you guys have done. I pull it out again periodically at my game night because I find, you know, I run a local meetup, and often I'll have people come out to this meetup who are not. This happened just last night. Again, someone brought 2 friends. Those 2 friends, I said, do you play board games? They're like, well, not since I was a kid when I played Monopoly, right? And it's like, okay. But you're here, so you're open-minded. I'm going to start with, I didn't have Latte last night, unfortunately. I wish I did. But, you know, I pulled out Splendor, for example, right? And then we follow up with another quick little gateway game to kind of get them. I think it was Project L we brought out next. But really wanted to try to get them hooked into the hobby, right? And that's what these games do, is they get their talons in people, where people are like, well, that was actually a lot of fun. That's quick to learn. So my mind's not all kind of flustered trying to figure out all these different rules and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed myself. And this is something different than I grew up on. What's the next thing in the hobby, right? And that's why we call it the gateway. It kind of it's like the gateway drugs, right? It pulls them into the addiction of, you know, the modern board game hobby. So kudos to you guys on that. I can't say how much I love that game, and it's a dice chucker, which is awesome as well. The designer on this particular game, where did you meet the designer? So who's the designer again? What's his name? And how did you guys meet?
Okay, his name is Cecil Oakton. That's actually a nom de plume.
Okay.
So, nom de guerre. He has another life, and is a retired person. He used to work for the Toronto Globe and Mail as a music critic, and went on to actually write a symphony.
Wow.
So he's got talents in the music area, but he's been showing up at playtesting game nights at local game cafes for as long as I've known anyway, and I've known him very long, with various little games. This particular one was themed with dogs at one point, and eventually he settled on these fish, these schools of fish, which actually became really relevant to the reason why fish school.
Yeah.
For protection, for foraging, for movement, for safety. He had no interest in running a Kickstarter of his own. He simply wanted to get a game published. Yeah. And he's not looking at a blockbuster runaway game or anything. He just would like to have a game published.
Yeah.
That's how he approached it with me, and knew that I could certainly do that part for him, whether it was a killer game that everyone would be playing all across the country or not. He didn't really care. He just wants to get a game out there and in real form. So he convinced me over the span of a couple of years. I watched Kickstarter and what it was doing, and saw that things weren't looking too good running Kickstarters at one point. But as things eased up and things have gotten a little bit better now post the pandemic, I got it ready for, let's get it out there, let's run this Kickstarter, let's get it published.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that there's kind of two paths, right? So my path on my end is I'm like, my business model is Kickstarter, right? That's the revenue model for me. My distribution is very, very narrow. Kickstarter, web store, and then the Amazon that I control. That's it. Publishers like yourself are the opposite, right? You're more retail based, right? So Kickstarter, as my understanding, is more, let's get some of the production covered off, right? As you prep for them when you do your rollout globally, right? That's kind of how you've been approaching most of your games. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Ideally, what I want to be doing is selling skids of games.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. And then, so that's interesting. So he was the one that came up with the fish then. So it wasn't you saying, hey, I want to skin this with fish. No?
No, but the fish got me excited.
Yeah.
This game. I played it with a guy. I fish, right? I go fishing.
Yeah.
With a buddy of mine who's a huge avid fisher, and actually he collects species. So he travels around the world fishing, and so he's caught like over 1,000 species of fish all around the world. But anyway, I played this prototype version of the game with him, and he loved it. And so the idea of the fish theme was something that that caught his eye as well. You've got to have a strong school in this game. Now, there's different size of fish, because not only do you have to have a strong school, but you have to try to undermine the other school. It's a fish eat fish world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that for that reason, the different sizes of fish, 1 to 6, determine the outcome of a conflict. And you initiate conflict basically by placing your fish token on a space where there's a smaller opponent's fish. You flip them over, you kill them, as it were, right? Except, have you ever played Stratego?
I haven't. This is one of these games that my entire life I've always thought, gosh, I got to play Stratego, and I never did. But I do get a bit of a reversey, or like Othello, as we call here in Canada, or like a Go kind of vibe to this. Is there kind of that kind of ish kind of feel?
It's more like Stratego in that case. So,
Okay.
I played Stratego when I was a kid, growing up in Sweden. And the general is the top fish, if you will, is the most powerful. It takes out anything, right? Except for one opponent, which is the spy. So anyone can kill the spy on the board, but the spy can kill the general. So in this game, Schooled, the number one smallest fish. I mean, anyone can take out the number one fish, but it has its little power of being able to take out the biggest fish. The concept being, well, it's poisonous or something like that, so it kills the number 6 fish.
There's a Spiky, Sienna, and Tiny Terror.
That's it. Exactly. Yes, they all have names and they all have personas. Very good.
I love it. On a side note, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I gotta get this out there. The fish, is it an angler fish? The one with like that little kind of you see him in Finding Nemo, where he's got like the little tentacle with the light on the end. Is that what it's called? An anglerfish, right?
Anglerfish, yeah.
So
right.
For those who don't know this, I had no idea, but this fish has only ever been seen in the dark of the ocean, or when they've basically had dead specimens. And then it was like a week or 2 weeks ago, for the first time in history, they actually have daytime images of this thing swimming in the ocean near the surface, and it was all over the news channel. So I thought that was kind of neat that happened right at the same time when you launched.
No,
like, what are the odds? Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So continue on. Yeah.
Oh, that was very much the artist who came up with that idea, or I might have suggested it, but he then took it and ran with it. The idea of this being an unusual species that stands out and is different, of course, has to be quite different from the other species.
And you and I are both fans of this artist. So this is Cesar del Gaia, and is it Ayala del Gaia? I can never pronounce his last name. I feel so bad.
Delgado.
Delgado, yeah. He is amazing, right? So he did Hamsters versus Hippos. He did the cover of Garden Geckos that we recently had. Bunny Drops, which is in our portfolio. He did all the kawaii images of the bunnies on all the cards. He is one talented dude, and again, it carries through in the art you have on this game. It is adorable, the artwork you guys have on this game. So I just want to give him a shout out on that because Caesar is I'm a big fan of Caesar's. So
Me too. I think he's fantastic. He is so creative, and he's so quick to like. He'll send you a sample, just a quick rough out.
yeah,
It took him a little time to put together, and then you kind of go, well, I like this part. Can you do more of this? And can you maybe give it scales and whatever else? And he goes back and comes back to you again, and boom, he just nailed it.
oh
I
yeah.
love.
Now there is two different boards, and I'm showing this on screen for people who are watching either on the replay or live. The You've got like kind of just a regular kind of symmetrical board. Then you got another one that's got like an asymmetrical board.
Yeah.
How does that affect the play style? Like where you've got like gaps in the bubbles that your fish are kind of swimming amongst.
Yeah, and we've got boom.
Yeah.
There's no center here.
Right.
Yeah. So how that changes it? Okay, it's actually very difficult to control the center because you're building up your school, and you got to be able to control your school, protect your own fish from attack. So for that reason, it's actually easier to start on the edges because at least you got one side that's secure.
Yeah.
The reverse side doesn't have that center piece. There's more room for some more creative school creations.
Mm-hmm.
It's be a very different kind of game in that when you see players playing the asymmetrical version, if you will, there seems to be larger schools that build up, and more of a case of maximizing the depths to get those bonus points. It's much easier to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the symmetrical one, which is a good way to start, to get the feel for what's it like to be protected on the edge versus what's it like to try to control the center, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find they're both very different games. So I decided to do both because it's just easy, right? You just flip the board and play the other side. And it doesn't cost any extra to print it either.
Reminds me a little bit of when you play Battle Sheep, for anybody that knows that game. Again, one of my favorites of all time. And it's very much an abstract game that's skinned in kind of this whole like building out flocks of sheep, right? And you're trying to have the largest kind of herd. But they've got this thing where they've got, you can have everything centralized as the way the tiles all connect together, so it's very symmetrical. Or you can create these gaps like you have here, which creates really different play styles and really throws your strategy out the window. Like you got to really rethink it, which is a good thing, I think, because sometimes people can become kind of almost like perfect a certain strategy, and then it becomes unbalanced when they're playing against other players. And I think when you have some of these gaps and things and asymmetry, in these boards, it can sometimes equal the playing field as well, too, right, between the different players.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I suppose so. I haven't played that game, but in this one, they're very different games for sure when you're playing them.
Yeah, it's super cool. And then, so what are some of the things that have been learnings going into this one, would you say, versus some of the other campaigns you've done? Is there things you've carried over from prior campaigns that you would recommend that people should do, as they kind of go from campaign to campaign, if somebody's looking at maybe getting into publishing someday? Or
Okay, so one thing we did totally differently with this one is we did not send out a single prototype to a previewer at all. And that's really from past lessons in which they were very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And they really didn't seem to give us an uptick. I'm convinced that we didn't really get an ROI off of those, more of a PR or cost that dragged us down. So
it's a challenge, right? Like it's incredibly expensive to launch a campaign, right? And the days of the past where you could kind of sketch some things out and put some concepts kind of on screen and say, this is kind of what we want to do, and if we get funded, maybe we'll do this, though they're gone. Right? Like the expectation now is you're coming with a finished game, right? So we get funded, this game's going to print. Like that is kind of the landscape that we're operating under right now. And part of that in the marketing is how do I build awareness of the game, right? And one path is to find channels that have large followings and pay them to do like a preview for you. And there's lots of them out there that we found. Dice Tower is one that some people utilize as well. And yes, you can get a lot of eyeballs on your games doing that, but the cost is quite high, right? And then you start doing these exercises of, okay, well, what is the return on that? And if I did that, or what if I then went and created prototypes instead and sent those to previewers? Would that create an ROI? What if I skip both those things and dump that money into meta ads, right? These are kind of the decisions you constantly, we as publishers are going through, saying, okay, I only have a fixed bucket of cash. I can't do everything. I got to find the things that are going to really poke through. And that's why I think we're seeing probably a lot less people doing the classics of banner ads on like Board Game Geek, even Google ads. Rarely will you see somebody actually do Google ads anymore, unless it's for the retail rollout of their game. But for Kickstarter, it's meta, right? That's 98% of people are going to come to your Kickstarter campaign through meta. So it's kind of finding these little pockets of, okay, how do I spend my money the most efficiently, right?
Board Game Geek, actually, that's an interesting one you mentioned. I mean, when we were looking at that long time ago, one of our early games, they even said themselves, this is not typically a kind of game that would do well with banner ads for us. Typically, they need to be really hardcore hobby games that are 2 or 3 hours long to play, that kind of style, not the casual games that we do. What I'm really interested in is getting games into people's hands who don't want to play Monopoly, right? They want to try something a little bit different, a little bit more advanced, using modern style gaming principles and game development methods, with mechanics that are more interesting, with mechanics that give you more agency, but not a hardcore gamer who is, does this, I don't know, 10, 20 hours a week, maybe,
Yeah, it's a good point, right? And I often will say this when, I've said this a number of times on the podcast, is who's the audience, right? So when you go to some of these prototyping events, for example, and you have game designers, playing your game, and then they go super deep on here's all the things that you need to change to fix your game. Often they're trying to turn into something that they would enjoy as a heavy gamer, right? And it's just true, right? So then you have to kind of step back, say thank you for the feedback, make sure you always write it down. But then what I always do is I'll do the opposite. I'll go find people who are non-gamers and have them play that same game, get their feedback, and then I kind of find where's the middle ground in between. There's a big difference between something like Garden Geckos, which is tile placement, and yes, there's some complexities to like hitting the bug objectives and all this. Like there's a lot going on the table. But conceptually, it's still a fairly simple concept, right? And it's a gateway game. It's something you would play with non-gamers. Bunny Drops is another good example of that. If I design those to meet the needs, desires, and wants of hardcore gamers, then I'm abandoning the people who I'm actually targeting those games to, which are casual gamers, right? So it's really kind of know your audience and make sure you're playing to the right audience and not... And I think that's the mistake a lot of people sometimes make is they try to make everybody happy and then you end up making nobody happy, right?
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting point you made. You mentioned Latte Throwdown. You love the game, right?
Yeah, I love it.
That's the point where all the artwork was done, the rules were written, we had to blind play test this game, right?
Yeah.
So took it to Snakes and Lattes game nights, put the game down on a table and instructed 4 players so that, you basically bought this game from a retail store somewhere because you thought it looked interesting. Now you have to learn how to play it. So they blind play test to make sure the rules worked. The rules worked. There was no problem. One of the guys who was play testing is actually a very well-known designer. Now, we won't mention the name here because it's not a good story, I suppose.
Sure.
But a very well-known designer who's designed dozens and dozens of games that have been published for big companies, even licensed properties and stuff. And he sort of casually suggested, what if you did this on this section when you roll the dice and you get an extra card or something like that. And this went on they were playing the game, but eventually he had completely redesigned this game so it did completely something else. Yeah. It's like, no, that wasn't the point.
We had that with Thanks but No Thanks.
What I ideally like to do is play test the game with people who just come off the street and
Yeah.
the last game they played was Monopoly or something, simple like that. And if they're having fun, if they're laughing, if they're, having a good time,
Yeah.
that is the home run. That's all that matters.
Meetups is probably my go-to now for those, for especially for gateway games. It's meetups is where you want to play test it, because that'll give you a sense of, okay, is this too difficult? Like, is it too complex, right? Like, I'm a gamer, you're a gamer, so we're gonna have shorthand that most people probably don't have in getting into understanding games quicker. Someone that doesn't have that, are they gonna be able to pick it up? And for me, I found that just, way more insight comes out of just playing with people who are casual gamers, or who are not kind of, for lack of a better word, in quote unquote, in the industry, right? And perfect example was, one of my first games was Tanks But No Thanks, and I think you were even there. You were playing with me the one time, I remember. It was when I was playtesting that at Snakes and Lattes, and the guy just across the table from us just shredded it because it had dice. And I was deflated, and I went home and I was so deflated, and then it took me a bit to kind of shake it off, saying, wait a second, this is a dice rolling game. Why am I listening to this guy? He's trying to take the dice out of a dice rolling game. Like, this is insanity. So, you can get caught up, I think, you can get caught in the weeds, I think, of kind of the whole play testing and getting professional opinions, when unprofessional opinions are sometimes the better ones to get.
Yeah. If they're having laughs and they're laughing and they're having a good time, yeah, that's really the joy of it. That's what counts. You asked me what else did we do differently, by the way. I want to mention one thing that we did very differently. Always, for every Kickstarter we've done, I would do an animation of the game, kind of introducing the pieces and the animation company that we use. They're really good at just picking up our art and giving it life and showing how some moves in the game are possible. But this time I decided to create a video that will go on to become the instructional video. So if you don't want to read the rules,
oh wow,
yeah, you can just use your phone, watch the how-to video on how to play the game, and you can start on reading it. And
is it with a live version of the game, Richard, or is it like animated?
No, it's animated.
Okay.
Completely animated, but it follows the rules. And I literally sent the rules to the animators to say, okay, I want an explainer video.
Yeah.
Now, in the Kickstarter, it's 2-minute video, so it's kind of long, actually. Should ideally be one, but I just, okay, we'll make it 2. They can, get an idea for how this game plays out. But when it gets converted into the instructional video, we'll slow down the animation, make the video about 4 minutes probably, and have more literally have the voiceover do the rules and show with pictures how you play this. And that way people don't have to read anything. They can just watch a video for 4 minutes and play the game.
Here's why it's an example to why it is it's important in this industry to network, right? The animator you're talking about is the same animator I used on Cities of Venus and Cities of Venus Survivors. These 2 campaigns is the same guy, and they're great, by the way. So thank you for hooking me up with these guys. But this is why it's important to network, right? Because you can talk to other people and say, hey, what did you use here? What did you use there? I'm still a huge fan of filming the actual game, right? From my perspective. So, anybody that goes back through any of my campaigns, it's always the same. I'll do some kind of maybe upfront, quick little animation kind of hook, and then bang right into here's a table shot of the game, right? And I'll get a camera zoomed up on it, and I'll flip the pieces over, and you see a hand actually flipping the pieces over. And what got me on that was when it was Tanner Yarrow, and because he did like three campaigns that were worth $1 million each in a row, where he had filmed them himself. Very little animation in them. Now he has more animation because he's got these flip coins and stuff, which are super cool. And you kind of need animation for those to kind of show up close, like how they actually function. But prior to that, when he was doing his map scrolls and his and all these campaigns he was running, it was him just doing little skits and then table shots of the game. And the guy hit $1 million. So what that said to me, and often I was talking to him off air, I'd say, why? I see all these people spending a lot of money on fancy videos, right? and you can go really I mean, even more than what you're spending. Like, you can go crazy fancy on some of these videos. And he's like, yeah, but I'd rather take that money and put that into ads. Because ads are what are going to bring backers to my campaign. Ads are what are going to drive pledges. I need to get the eyeballs on the page first before they can even see that video, right? So if you have an infinite amount of dollars to spend on your campaign, or if you're a large company, you can kind of do it all, right? But kind of what you're saying earlier about bootstrapping, there's ways to bootstrap this industry to do things in an affordable way. One is getting, recommendations from someone like your friend Richard, right? Who says, hey, here's a contact that I use for animation, right? Great. Listen to other people, watch other people's campaigns and things like that. So just want to kind of throw that out there for the audience that, I think sometimes people think that you need to invest a whole bunch of money to run a campaign, and there are ways to kind of bootstrap this, right?
Well, that was the purpose of this video, is we know we have to create a video for Kickstarter. That's got to be done. Well, but the problem is, once you've done that, that video is useless. Once the Kickstarter is over,
yeah,
you can use that video for anything. So was the purpose behind it. Is, okay, we can recycle this video. We can give it legs. We can make sure it's there for people who want to learn how to play the game.
Oh, that's super cool. So what's the next steps for you, Richard? Like, from here, obviously you'll go to production, kind of the same model you've done in the past. Is this worldwide? Where are you looking at shipping this, and where are your distributors kind of set up for this?
This game is, because I've been out of Kickstarter for 4 years, so this game has another purpose, which is to just get back into Kickstarter, get the feel for it, get Cecil Oakton's first game published and up there. So it's not looking at this as a kind of a commercial property as such. But I did want to get a feel for what's going on, and I want to get a feel for what's happening when you do meta ads, or the whole process again, get my legs in it. And I have not selected my next game, but that is what I ideally want to do. Then is in about a year or so, I'll bring out a high potential type game. In other words,
are you willing to take, like, if there's people out there listening to this podcast who have a great game idea, like, can they send a submission to you? Would you be willing to look at it, or?
I would, except I already get about 2 or 3 a week, so I get a lot. I can't get to.
But say it's really, really good. Like, how would they do that? Through your website, or how do they submit?
Yeah, no, they typically all come through the websites. Get a short note, and there's a link usually with this is how you play this game. I review a lot. Others, just immediately I can tell that this is a game that I need to review. But thank you for the submission. But yeah, I do look at a lot of games, and I haven't found one that I really, really think has that high potential note to it, much like what you have caught on to with Venus. That's a fantastic...
thank you. Yeah, sometimes just finding kind of what is that thing that you can kind of... It's kind of like I always look at like Wingspan, right? What is your Wingspan, right? What is the property that you're going to be able to take across different iterations where you're not... I know some people argue it's kicking a dead horse, but I mean, I've seen Finspan, and there's enough different there, I think, that it justifies its existence, right? So what is that property that you can kind of start spreading out across multiple iterations, I think, is kind of where another trend I'm starting to see in this industry, where I'm seeing more and more people create story universes that then they're doing multiple games in, right? Standalone games in, and certainly we're pursuing that same path. So that's awesome. Well, for those who want to check out Schooled, I do recommend people check it out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Simply go there, or you can just type in Schooled on Kickstarter. You'll find it. Every bit helps, even $1 to show your support, help us with our backer counts, and help with the algorithms. It's always appreciated. Richard, I want to wish you all the best on this campaign, buddy, and we'll have to go for a coffee next time I'm down in Toronto.
Hey, that'd be awesome. Thank you, man.
All right, brother. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.